Gilbert Faku is a South African adventurer and amateur historian. A few years ago, he had a chance meeting with the Pondo tribesman, Gilbert Faku, who was on his way to dig for ceramics and beads on an island where a Portuguese trade ship, the São Bento, had been wrecked on a return voyage from India more than 450 years ago. Gilbert now plans to return to find Gilbert, to see how he uncovers ancient treasures with his bare hands and minimal tools, and to confirm his findings are from the São Bento that sank in April 1554 off the island where Gilbert was digging. He hopes also to see his collection of centuries-old relics, such as porcelain, rings, and above all, a golden jewel-encrusted pendant. Gilbert Faku is a South African adventurer, an amateur historian. He's traveled to South Africa's rugged stretch of coastline, the Wild Coast, many times before. The Wild Coast is famous for its history of shipwrecks, as well as for its scenic beauty. Its lush coastal forests, giant waves, spectacular gorges, and beautiful rivers. The local Pondo tribe farm cattle, sheep, goats, and chickens, while others harvest what they can from the sea.
When I first met Gilbert 4 years ago while I was on the beach in the Wild Coast, I ended up accompanying him on what turned out to be a treasure hunt. Near the mouth of the Msakaba River, he excavated an area, and much to my surprise, he actually found a little piece of blue and white porcelain. And I did a little research and I found out that a Portuguese slave ship called the São Bento actually wrecked at the exact spot where Gilbert was doing these excavations. So I'm heading back there in the hope of finding out whether Gilbert is still doing his treasure hunting and whether the things that he has found are actually from the São Bento wreck. Because I don't speak much Xhosa and because Gilbert doesn't speak any English, we've actually arranged for a translator, a guy who's familiar with the area, who will hopefully help us to find Gilbert. Bazo, nice to meet you. I'm Gilbert.
Okay, how are you?
Very good, very good.
Yeah, good.
This is Henry. He's coming with us.
Yeah.
Very naughty dog.
Yeah.
We're gonna take you to Msakaba now.
Yeah.
Is that okay?
Yeah, it's okay.
Baso is a local Pondo guide who's going to try to help Gilbert find Gilbert. But first they get supplies in the local marketplace at Lusikisiki, the last town before they head to the deep rural area.
And is that a Pondo name?
As well as you see.
Ah, Pondo is this guy.
Yeah.
So you are Pondo.
From here on, visitors have to do without cell phones and access to fuel and convenience stores. After stocking up on some fresh food, they leave the small town hustle and bustle of Lusikisiki behind and make their way toward the Wild Coast. Gilbert lives in a remote area near the coast, isolated and accessible only with a four-wheel drive vehicle. The area becomes more sparsely populated, and traditional huts and cattle soon dot the landscape. As they descend toward the coast and a fishing cottage that'll be their base, the weather threatens. The cottage overlooks Msikaba Island, where Gilbert digs at low tide. It was here that the Sao Bento, with its cargo of beads, porcelain, textiles, and slaves, was wrecked more than 4 centuries ago. Nearly a third of those on board drowned during the wreck, but more than 300 made it to shore, only to find themselves in a hostile environment about which they knew absolutely nothing. The Sao Bento castaways camped at a freshwater stream in a wood near the Nsikaba River mouth. They spent a few days salvaging food from the wreck and collecting nails with which they hoped to barter with the local tribes. They were terrified when they first encountered the Pondo, but soon realized the local tribe was simply curious. The castaways exchanged goods for food before they began the arduous journey of several hundred miles toward Mozambique. Gilbert lives in the rural Msikaba area, where he farms cattle and sheep. But his homestead has no street address, and many of the roads in this area have no names either.
What did the Namazu Gilbert? Yaman down into Lawa. Kupuna.
Finding Gilbert's homestead would be impossible without the help of locals and a suitable vehicle. And eventually, Corbus and Mbaso reach what they think is the place. And what is more, Gilbert seems to remember Corbus from their last meeting several years ago.
Okay, so can you ask him if it's okay if we go and do some digging on the island? Okay, great.
Okay.
Well, great. After a little bit of a search, we've managed to find Gilbert, and he's very kindly offered to show us how he goes about excavating. And we're going to head down to the beach and hopefully find some treasure.
Gilbert digs on the Msikaba Island, which only becomes accessible at low tide. Over the years, Gilbert has uncovered fascinating artifacts using only his simple tools. It was confirmed in 1968 that this is where the Sao Bento was wrecked. Corbus asked Gilbert whether he had heard about the wreck of the Sao Bento.
Andiqala phela iminyaka ndisaqala phela hayi ku-15 phaka hayi ayidlula ngapha ku-15 ngasibeni ishumi nesithathu nesibili ndaqala ngezi ndizichola ndihamba ndingakambi okay chola ndihamba nje no yonke indawo apha bendigumba khona nasemanzini phaa andifili mna ndiye ndime nje emanzini apha emanzini ndinelibona uma ndihamba okanye ndisimba ngefosholo uma ndiphosa phezu kwelitye bheke ngesandla hayi kaloku sendisazi mna abazi bona khona phaa phakathi sikhutshwa kwabelungu ngombani bazi ngaka ngesikhephe but faka umdrama faka icingo hayi ndasoka ndidoba fa ndiyacamanga ndiyaguma.
Despite Gilbert's best efforts, after 2 or 3 hours digging on the island and having found nothing, they decide to leave the island to avoid being trapped by the incoming tide. Back at his homestead, Gilbert takes Corbus and Baso inside to show them some of his collection. Most of his finds are beads and pieces of blue and white porcelain that have been dated by London's famous Victoria and Albert Museum as being from the period 1530 to 1560. It seems that all of what Gilbert has found is from the São Bento, which was known to be carrying porcelain, beads, and other luxury items. However, what was not to be seen were the rings and other jewelry that Gilbert is said to have discovered.
I live that things as that and the thing I'm about to make says 20. That new Dr. Correns Cox State says 20 I'm about. Then I phone him all. 3 my ring. 3. Aye, I'm at Loga Sequasa Puma. Okay, come here. That kind of thing in catches of thing was being netway. The pin that thing it anginalia. I don't born, the thing with 300. In cart, in netway, even with 200 Mukromavin. The pin and the thing is a foot in the thing in Fidich. The thing was on Mawagaman and Mukromatlan, the thing fish.
Disappointed that there wasn't any jewelry on display, Corbus was pleased to hear that Gilbert apparently still has the golden jewel-encrusted pendant.
Yes, I see we call it. We call it bias. In my stop as shop as move one, in stop as move, as class and said, we call it bias. Wait. I come out. In Balonji. Capas any line. Capas and Jabo with Opus Bove, as the line ganje. As Bove, Nesn just brew, so stars at egg. Galogo ibon on Mali. Heto. Bible now. I couldn't we won and go going on yag. For 20 rand, Loyaga Zayo, you'll be we born, you'll be 300. I and my good fort, Amalgamavini, Tengis and Gamal. Then come. Tate. I Karoma the Pupas of any poor people icon. And this is a shame to you. You're Salah by Conanango.
Corbus left Gilbert and made his way back to the cottage to reflect on what he had seen and heard.
We had quite an eventful day today. Just finding Gilbert was a real success. Then getting him to agree to take us on a treasure hunt, and it didn't really matter to me that we didn't find anything. Just to see that he was still alive and still doing his thing was really great. And then when we actually got to see all of his finds, it was fascinating and good to see that these stories we've heard about him were true. But I did have mixed emotions to some extent, because a lot of the finds that people had told me he had were missing. For example, the many rings that he'd found. He told us that he'd exchanged the rings for 20-liter cooking pots. We were hoping to document these rings and hopefully film them and find out if they were from the São Bento wreck. And when I asked Gilbert what he wasn't showing us, however, he told me about his golden jewel-encrusted pendant, and I agreed to pay a sum to look at this pendant. He didn't want it filmed, and I can understand that. I guess he feels kind of vulnerable out here, and he did say that he hides it in a place that only he knows. And on the one hand, I want to make this drawing so I can give people an idea of what it is, but on the other hand, I'm a little bit scared of what kind of can of worms I could be opening.
Amateur historian Corbus van Heerden is exploring records dating back to the 1500s and the heyday of Portuguese navigation. The Cape of Good Hope was known as a graveyard of ships, but sea captains of yore also talked about another danger, the mountains of water off the wild coast. Many shipwreck victims died trying to get to shore, with the São Bento A third of those on board drowned, and it's not difficult to see why, with the brute force of these waves smashing into the rocks. And it wasn't just ancient ships that went down on the wild coast. A little over a decade ago, the BBC China wrecked not far from here. Even with modern technology, ships in the 21st century can come unstuck when faced with the might of Mother Nature here on the wild coast. When he first met Gilbert, the cattle herder turned treasure hunter, Corbus was in the area investigating the most famous shipwreck on this stretch of coastline, the Grosvenor. The Grosvenor was headed back home to England when it went down at Lambasi Bay on August 4, 1782. Her captain incorrectly calculated the ship's position as being 300 miles offshore, when during the night, several of the crew reported seeing what they thought were fires on land. He stubbornly refused to change course until it was too late. Several of those on board drowned, but 125 made it to shore. Unlike the survivors of the São Bento, the Grosvenor castaways decided to hike south toward the Cape Colony. Sadly, they didn't fare much better though, and 4 months after beginning their march, most of the Grosvenor party had perished and only 15 reached the Cape Colony. For many years, rumors persisted that the ship had been carrying a fortune in bullion and silver, which drove some treasure hunters to extraordinary lengths and ultimately to ruin. Only 2 cannons and a few gold and silver coins have ever been recovered from the wreck of the Grosvenor. As another day at Msikaba begins, Corbus and Mbaso find a fishing rod at the cottage, and Corbus decides to try and catch breakfast off some nearby rocks. Although he's a keen fisherman, it isn't his day. Corbus decides instead to purchase some crayfish, which are harvested seasonally by local Pondo fishermen, before heading off to meet up with Gilbert and to return to Msikaba Island. Corbus asks Gilbert what determines whether he comes to dig or stays behind to tend to his livestock at his homestead.
Hours, 6 hours in the car. Yeah, so when talk going to tell pants and travel, and that's so on job of the commander. I want to cool you, second order.
Gilbert told Corbus that he had previously found porcelain and beads in the waters around the island, but as he wasn't a strong swimmer, he preferred to dig on the land. Since Corbus had brought along a diving mask, he decided to take his chances in the waters of the island to see what he could find. Looking for anything underwater proved more difficult than Corbus had expected, and it made him appreciate Gilbert's reluctance to search anywhere other than on dry land. While Corbus was searching the waters of Msikaba Island, Gilbert found a piece of porcelain, as well as a cerulean bead.
Natoli komi chukal first. When the toli piece, and the Kolanga to Bandimbenda was 2, and Kolanga, then the Tolagunda 4.
Gilbert's persistence shows that Msikaba Island still holds treasures for those who are prepared to work hard to find them.
As music are cool, but none of them Tola. And ninjas celebrate.
Ships like the Sao Bento, from which Gilbert's finds originate, carried not only treasure, but passengers, some of whom made it to shore and tried to hike to safety. The Sao Bento survivors made their way inland and north until they were forced to stop.
So this is Msikaba Gorge, and every evening at around about this time, endangered Cape vultures from all over South Africa gather here to roost. This is also where the Sao Bento castaways faced their first big obstacle in reaching Mozambique. They had to cross this river. The captain sent a search party to try and find a safe place to cross. But in the end, they had no option but to build rafts. Once they crossed this river, it was only the start of their troubles, because a few miles further north, there's another river and another gorge. Of course, the Sao Bento wasn't the first Portuguese ship to go down in these parts. A few years earlier, the Sao João had sunk just a few miles north, and the Sao Bento castaways actually came across a survivor from the Sao João, a man called Rodrigo Tristão.
A Sao Bento survivor reported that Tristão had been so burned by exposure to the sun that he'd become indistinguishable from the local Pondo tribesmen. However, memories of these men and women endured among the local inhabitants, and from fireside tales, a mythology grew. It described the sailing ships as an object like a giant ukwembe, a wooden meat tray that would disgorge white men onto the shore. As another day ended, Corbus had established that even after all these years, Gilbert is still finding ancient relics on Msikaba Island.
Today I really got a feel for how hard Gilbert actually works. After I'd lost patience and gone off a dive and see if I could find anything in the water, he actually found a piece of porcelain and a bead, so he is actually still finding things and they're still there. And I'm quite excited because he's invited me to go to his homestead tomorrow, and I'm gonna get a little taste for the way things work out here when he's not treasure hunting.
After all these years, Gilbert is still finding relics on Msikaba Island. The only disappointment has been that Corbus never got to film Gilbert's pendant. But to give an idea of what it looked like, he's decided to recreate what he had seen in a sketch.
I agreed to pay a sum to look at this pendant, and it was absolutely spectacular. And I mean, seeing it was just unbelievable, seeing this thing. I could feel by the weight of the pendant that it was definitely gold. And although the stones in it were red and green, I couldn't say for sure whether they were ruby and emerald, but somehow it didn't make it any less attractive. It really looked beautiful, and just holding it in my hand was quite amazing, just seeing the sunlight reflect on it. And my honest opinion is that it has to be from the Sao Bento wreck. And I could just see that it was genuine. This was definitely not a fake. How it ended up on that ship, I don't know. All I can say is that it was magnificent. I can't imagine what Gilbert must have felt the day that he actually found this pendant, because it's just incredible.
With time running out on their last day on the wild coast, Corbus and Basso head back to Gilbert's homestead to say their goodbyes.
So the trip's gone really well. Gilbert's been very kind to us, and we've actually got him display cabinets, and we just thought that it would be something nice, something practical, and he'll be able to display his finds in here, hopefully. Here he is.
Oh. Oh. Good. Thank you. You're welcome.
Okay.
Thank you.
When he's not digging for treasure on Msikaba Island, Gilbert, like many Pondo, oversees his cattle and sheep, as well as a few chickens at his homestead. Corbus asked him how he came to live on the wild coast.
Sasuke kumkhambathi utata moyengaka ufike bonke begula beneslephele bechaceka inyawo wakho isibhedlela sesilephele safika ndandisenatala ndandiselusa inkomo namagusha ndingumfana ngaka ndakhula ke ndaya eNatala ndasika umoba.
Gilbert generously offered to treat Corbus and Baso to a favorite local dish known as shisanyama, which translates literally as hot meat.
This is the style. Get a little bit of fat in the meat, a bit of salt.
And to taste some of his homemade traditional beer. Despite the numerous failed sophisticated attempts at salvaging treasure here over centuries, an elderly Pondo man with the rudimentary tools continues to prove that success often has more to do with tenacity than it has to do with technology.
Ngeminyaka emithathu ndibonile into endiyenzayo. Hayi ngeke azibone kaloku yena memfile. Akagumbanga.
In this unspoiled place, where so many mysteries go unsolved and many treasures go undiscovered, we've discovered perhaps the real treasure of the wild coast, Gilbert Faku.
Adventure time, Henry.